All right, we're going to talk about the growth of labor movements in the Gilded Age. What we're going to be looking at here largely is how the role of workers changed. And in a lot of these notes, there's not going to be much to write down. A lot of it's just going to be pictures and us talking about it. So kind of keep in mind, take notes where you need to. I'll tell you when it's really important to write it down, okay? So this is the labor force distribution from 1870 to 1900. And you can kind of see that it's pretty stagnant, but farming is going down from 32% down to 25%. Everything else is pretty stable as we go on. But if we break this down a little bit further, this is the changing labor force from 1870 to 1910. What's the big change that you see happening immediately?
Agriculture.
Agriculture goes from 50% down to 31%. That means a lot of farmers have been put out of work, okay? And we talked about how that happened in an earlier lecture. Development of, excuse me, of things like the steel plow, mechanical reaper. It made it much, much easier. We also have a labor force that's gone from 12 million to 36 million. So, growing labor force, less farming jobs, it's going to force people to industrialize. And one of the ways they solve that problem is through child labor. And childhood is one of those things that we don't always comprehend very well. Because in most of history, there was no such thing as childhood. That might not make sense to you right now. But you were a baby, and then you were an adult. And as soon as you were old enough to do a job, you were expected to do a full day's work of a man or a woman, okay? So you have children as young as 9, 10 years old going off and working in order to help their family make ends meet. And you can see girls working in looms here. You can see these young men as mechanics in a loom, getting their hands in there working on these things. And children were used a lot in factories because their little hands could get in places that a full-grown man's hand has difficulty getting into. Children also worked quite a bit in agriculture, not just factory work. That top left picture is of a kid picking tobacco. By the way, that's still in the state of Kentucky. There are no child labor laws against tobacco. You can go work in the tobacco fields at 9 or 10 years old in Kentucky still, because it's considered a tradition of that state. But it's something that's they've always done, and a lot of the tobacco farms are dependent on their children to work. This is in England, but it happened here too. These are child miners, coal miners. Why would you use kids for coal mines?
They're smaller.
They're smaller. You don't have to dig as big a tunnel to send a kid in. And the tunnel is a waste. You need to follow that line of coal and pull it out. You don't need all that hole. So big men are more work. It was sometimes compared to galley labor. Galley labor is an old term from the ancient days, where slaves would be put in a ship, in a galley of a ship, and they would pull excuse me, the oars. They just became part of the machinery. Well, that's what kids were. They were just part of the machinery. It was like galley labor. Even beyond children, though, there was a lot of labor unrest. I want you to look at this map. All of those pink areas are counties in the United States that reported some kind of a labor strike, where people are going on strike, refusing to work. That's most of the country. And if you'll notice, most of it's located up here around the Great Lakes region. Well, that's where most of our factories were. It's where most of our railroads were. Think about it. You've got Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. It's all up in this area, okay? Pittsburgh. It's all there. And that's where you would expect a lot of this. So what exactly are they going on strike for? The railroad strike was people demanding more rights. Now I want you to write this one down. The Molly Maguires. The Molly Maguires was a group of Irish labor workers. Write it down. A group of Irish labor workers. They were led by James McParland, and they were the muscle for the labor unions. So these guys would go out and physically fight to protect the rights of workers. And we're not talking about fighting as in standing up for your rights. We're talking about going out with chains and bats and fighting to try and get things done. James McParland was a boxer before he organized this.
Can you repeat what we're supposed to write down? The group of Irish what?
Labor workers. In 1875, he organizes these labor workers as the muscle for the unions. So management's got to answer with their own muscle. And they're going to hire the Pinkerton Detective Agency. Write this down too. The Pinkerton Detective Agency. You may have heard of this. If you ever watched any old Western movies, the Pinkertons are always the detectives that are chasing down the guys. Pinkertons are chasing down, they've got a posse and they're chasing everybody down. Well, as the Old West died down and we weren't doing so much of that, the Pinkertons became muscle. And what would happen is the Molly Maguires would rise up to try and protect the laborers, and then management would hire the Pinkertons to go in and break up the unions, or break up the protests. And the Pinkertons would come in with guns and bats and chains and whatever else they could, and break it up. They were called bully boys sometimes. So you need this whole chart, and I'm going to talk about it as we go through it. Anytime you have a growing labor force, you're going to have arguments between labor and management. By labor, we mean the people that do the work, the hourly wage people. Management are the bosses, the owners, and they're never going to agree. Management wants to get as much labor out of us as they can for the cheapest price. Labor wants to give as much or as little labor as they can for the most money. Yes, sir.
So you're not doing any college courses in the meeting room today?
Just Monday and Wednesday.
Just Monday and Wednesday, that's it. Thank you.
So there's always going to be this conflict, and let's look at the tools they can use, because it's the same tools we can still use today. Okay, we're going to go down management first. First off, management has scabs. Have you ever heard that term before? Anybody seen the movie The Replacements? Football movie? Mm-hmm. Oh man, y'all missed a good one. We should watch that one. A scab is a replacement worker. And what they could do is, if you go on strike, they could just say, fine, you're fired, and replace you with somebody else. Or replace you temporarily. Usually they were immigrant workers that would work cheaper. When I was a kid, I talk about the replacements because it's loosely based on a real event. Back in the, I guess it was the early 90s, the NFL went on strike demanding more wages. And instead of doing it, the Cowboys and other teams just went out and hired replacement players. And it was one of the best football seasons I've ever seen because, while they may not have been the greatest players ever, they cared and they worked. They saw it as a big audition and tryout. And the Cowboys went all the way to I think it was the league championship game, and Then the strike broke and the real cowboys came back and we lost. It was terrible. But scabs were a big problem. And a lot of times your Pinkertons and your scabs would get violent, they would fight each other. These are people that cross the picket line. They had a PR campaign, a public relations campaign. They had the money to put advertising out about their product. They had the Pinkertons. They could send out there with their guns. They could lock out people. A lockout is where they just decide to wait out the workers. Fine, you want to go on strike? We'll just close the plant down. We'll see who needs to eat first, you or me. And eventually the workers will break because they need the wages. They have blacklists. A blacklist is a list of undesirable employees. It's literally a list of people that have caused problems. So you formed a union at one railroad company, they fire you, they put your name on a list, and every other railroad company looks at that list and they won't hire you. So now you have one skill, you know how to work on a train, but nobody will hire you. You've been blacklisted. These are illegal, by the way, but they still happen. They have yellow dog contracts. That was a contract where you said you refused to join a union, you agreed to never join a union. Those are also illegal, unless you're a school teacher in Texas, in which case it's illegal for us to unionize. I don't know why, how that's constitutional. They have court injunctions. In some cases, the business was deemed so important that they could go to court. The court would order people to go back to work. That seems really wrong to me. But think about it. What if your job was, you're a coal miner. Winter's coming up. And the coal miners go on strike. Most people heated their house with coal back then.
Trains.
People would die. Trains ran on coal. Medicine wouldn't get places. So they could go to court and the court would say, no, it's too dangerous. You have to go back to work. And they order you to go to work. That's pretty screwed up to me. To me, at that point, it's slavery. I don't have the choice. I'm being made to go to work. And they have what they call the open shop, which is a shop where you didn't have to join a union. These are all pretty good tools. But labor had some good tools too, like boycotts. They would organize boycotts and go, fine, we just won't buy your product. Or sympathy demonstrations where they would tell people about how bad their work conditions were, and people would sympathetically not buy the product until conditions got better. Closed shops, organized strikes, wildcat strikes. The big thing is strikes. Strikes is their biggest weapon. If you're a skilled worker, there's very few people that can do your job. So if you go on strike,
You're screwed.
you're hard to replace. And you've got a power over the people. I mean, you want to guarantee yourself a good job forever. Make sure you're the only one at the place that knows how to do your job. Okay? Well, that's what people did. These skilled laborers could do that. By the way, an organized strike is a planned strike where we go to and we tell everybody, we're going on strike until we get this. A wildcat strike is when nobody wants to admit it's a strike. Everybody just calls it sick the same day. Okay? And that's hard to prove. I love this picture. This is the woman on the left was working in the garment industry as a seamstress, and she went on strike demanding more wages. The woman on the right is a scab. She came in and took the job at a lower rate. And I don't know about you, but I think the woman on the left is about to kill the one on the right.
Looks kind of like it.
I don't want to be in the wrong side of either one of those two. But it gets bad. All right, very first labor union is the Knights of Labor. Write down, Knights of Labor was the first labor union. It does have the best name ever. It's founded by a guy named Terrence Powderly, who has the greatest mustache in history. And you grow my mustache out like that, what do you think? I could rock that. And it looks like he shaved off his eyebrows and replaced them with Arkansas bush caterpillars. I'm not sure what that's about. So Terrence Powderly organizes the Knights of Labor, the first union. The problem with it is, it's getting stuck on me. It had some great goals, and you need to know the goals. Write these down. It had some great goals, but it allowed anybody to join the union, and that's going to be a weakness. Its goals: it wanted an 8-hour workday. The average workday up to this point was 12 to 15 hours. So they're saying we want to stop working 12 to 15 hours and instead work 8 hours. By the way, we'd like to do that for the same amount of money. How is management going to deal with that? I don't know. If you were a manager and somebody said, I would like to work a third less but be paid the same amount, are you going to do it? I'm not going to agree to that. All right, I'll pay you more money. You're going to work more, right? They also wanted workers' cooperatives. Workers' cooperatives are interesting to me because it's where the workers actually own the business. It's the idea that the people that make the product should own the business that doesn't. So instead of having a rich guy that owns the factory that comes in and then pays you an hourly rate to work there, all the people, the workers, would pool their money. They would open a factory together, and then the profits would be shared equally among all of them. It's really kind of a communistic idea. This has been tried a few times. It doesn't work real well. I've already talked about worker-owned factories. They want to abolish all child labor and prison labor. Now, this sounds really good. I am all for the abolition of child labor because child labor is dangerous. Except, that's not why they wanted to abolish it. Why do you think they wanted to make child labor and prison labor illegal?
So people would have to hire more men.
Yeah, it was cheaper. It was cheaper labor. They didn't want to compete against it. You could pay a prison, a third as much in contract, and they'll just make their workers do it. Or you could pay a kid, a tenth of what you pay an adult. You ever try to get a kid to do something for you?
It's hard.
It's either really hard, or you can talk them into mowing the yard for 50 cents. One of the two. It's one extreme or the other. I used to subcontract to my sisters when I was a kid. That was hilarious. Mom would be like, you need to go do this for $10. All right. And I'd go to my sisters and I'll pay you $2. Increased circulation of greenbacks. You may know what a greenback is? Probably got them in your wallet right now. Paper money. Okay? It's money that's not based on gold or silver. And I hate greenback because it doesn't have any real value. Its sole value is because we believe it has value. But, so we use today. We all use greenbacks now. Our money is not backed by gold and silver. You cannot take that $20 bill in your pocket to the bank and say, I would like $20 in gold. You used to be able to. We used to have what they call gold and silver certificates. You can't do that anymore.
You can there's some stores like that though.
Well, you're selling it though, you're not really trading it.
Oh,
And when you
okay.
sell it, you're actually losing money because they're paying you less than it's worth. Yeah. But, they got it. Equal pay for men and women, pretty progressive. Safety codes, they wanted the workplace to be a safer place. They wanted to prohibit foreign labor, stop the immigrants from coming here, pretty common. And abolish the national bank. Now, this union fails. This union is only around for a short time. But if I look at it, I go, well, we got this, we got this, we got this, we've got this, we've got this. Would you call them a failure? No. Most of what they wanted, they got. Now, it's not going to be the Knights of Labor that gets it. It's going to be the next group that pulls it off. But they're going to have some good goals, and they're going to be the ones that are pushing for it all. Okay? The Great Railroad Strike of 1877 is mostly Pullman car workers. They just refuse to work. So these trains have to run. It gets violent, incredibly violent. The U.S. Army is called out. And the president orders all the railroad workers back to work. It gets very, very bad. People are killed in this strike. If you could imagine a time period when the United States Army is being used against workers because they're on strike. It's terrifying to me because you've got a right to strike under the law, unless you're a school teacher in Texas, in which case we can't strike either. All right, so I got this cartoon, and I put it up here because I've seen it show up on the STAR test before. It's actually one of my favorite cartoons. The tournament today, a set two between labor and monopoly. So you've got monopoly as this big gold train, of course. So this is symbolized by big business, okay? And then you've got labor. And labor's riding a donkey with a pot on its head. Who's got the advantage here? I'm sorry. If you don't tell me anything else, I'm going to look at this and I'm putting my money on monopoly, okay? And that's what the artist is saying, is that our government protects the rich at the expense of the poor. And we just saw that in the railroad strike, where they sent the army in and forced people to go back to work to protect a company owned by these rich guys, okay? So people are sick of the government. They want to change things. And a new movement starts to break out called anarchy. Anytime you see the word archy, A-R-C-H-Y, it means a type of government. And ana means not or anti or against. So this is people that are against all government. An anarchist believes there should be no law, no government, period, every man for himself. What do y'all think of that?
Leave it up.
Sounds pretty cool to me, but I also know that it never ever happened. I've had this discussion. We'll never have anarchy, because as soon as the government falls down, whoever has the biggest gun becomes the new government.
Yep.
There'll never be anarchy. Somebody's always going to be in charge. But this group of anarchists decide to meet. Excuse me. It's not COVID. It's hay fever. This group of anarchists decided to meet down at the lakefront outside of Chicago to protest the new government. And their goal is socialism. Their goal is to turn all the businesses over to the workers and have the workers of the world unite together and overthrow the rich. Have a communist revolution. Well, outside the Haymarket Harvesting Machine Company in Haymarket Square, the anarchist protest becomes a riot. We call it the Haymarket Affair, the Haymarket Riot. 1886, these guys are just protesting, and then somebody throws a homemade bomb. We don't know who did it. To this day, we don't know who did it. But it killed several police officers.
Whatever it is, they're dead and
killed several police officers, and the Knights of Labor get blamed for it.
Hmm.
People all over the country tear up their union card, and the Knights of Labor goes bankrupt because of it, okay? And there's a big movement all around the world to support cops again. I don't know if you've ever lived in a town when a cop's been killed. But all of a sudden, everybody believes Blue Lives Matter, and they put those flags up, and it's a different place. And they really get behind the police department. Well, that's what happens nationwide. And they crack down on everybody at this time period. The Haymarket martyrs, those people that died in the fight, become heroes nationally. And something has to replace the Knights of Labor. So this guy shows up, Samuel Gompers. Apparently it's required that you have a stupid-looking mustache to run a union. Samuel Gompers forms the American Federation of Labor. You can just put down AFL, American Federation of Labor, AFL. It was formed in 1886. It is still around today. It is the largest union in the world, AFL, still around today. Founded by a cigar manufacturer, Samuel Gompers. But he's going to be smarter than the Knights of Labor, because remember the Knights of Labor allowed anybody to join? Knights of Labor would let you join if you were a man or a woman or a minority, or if you were a skilled worker or an unskilled worker. And that's great, it became very large. But it also means it's very hard to go on strike. Because if you're a street sweeper, if your job is to push a broom down a street, and you go on strike,
The next man does it.
I can find 10 more people that can sweep a broom. But if you're a skilled worker, if your job is to be a mechanic on a train, and you go on strike, I'm screwed, because I can't find anybody else that can do that. Still true today. If all you organize are skilled workers, you are better off than if you organize everybody. All right? So this guy says, nope, only skilled workers could come. He also said only men could come and only whites could come. It made it a narrow group, but it was something that worked really well. He maintains a national strike fund. Y'all know how unions work? You pay union dues. You pay so much money a month to the union. And in exchange for that, they go in and they negotiate your contract for you, and they provide legal assistance for you if you need it. And this guy said, we're going to take some of that money and we're going to put it back in a strike fund. And what that strike fund's for is whenever one of our groups needs to go on strike, we'll come in and we'll pay them their salary while they're out of the strike fund. So you can afford to stay off and they can't just lock you out. Management says you're locked out, you can't, fine, here's your pay. You stay on strike. Works really well, okay? A national strike fund is genius. He evangelized for unionism, told people that unionism is important, started negotiating between the different craft unions so they weren't competing against each other. Pretty smart guy. And it worked. They became massive. Their first big test is going to be in 1892 with the Homestead Strike. Now, you don't have to know this name. It was the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. That's part of the AFL. And they decided to go on strike because the Carnegie Steel plant has not given them a raise in quite some time. And they need their money because this is a chart of the profits for the Carnegie Steel plant. Think they're making a lot more money? They're making a lot more money. Between 1895 and 1900, they had this kind of an increase. But workers' salaries have been the same since 1890. They've stayed down here. So while profits are going up, the workers aren't getting to share in it. So they go on strike. How do you deal with it? Well, this guy, Henry Clay Frick, he's in charge of the factory. And And he says, fine, I will just lock the factory down. I'll try and outweight the workers. Shuts it down, sends them all home and says, see how you do if you're not getting fed. And then the strike fund ran out there and they're starving. They want to come back to work. So he gets this call from Alexander Berkman. Berkman says, I want to talk to you, Mr. Frick. I want to negotiate an end to this. So Frick invites him in, Berkman goes in, and instead of talking, he shoots him. He tries to assassinate the leader of the factory. Now it fails. Henry Clay Frick does survive. But this shows you exactly how bad things were. At the Homestead plant, they're arguing over how much money they get paid an hour, and the result was somebody got shot. Okay? It's that violent. Y'all know what a company town is? We don't have it much around here anymore, but this used to be really common. And cities, businesses, wanted all their people to be close to work. So what they would do, particularly railroads, the most famous one is Pullman, Illinois, where they made the big Pullman railroad cars. They built a whole town. It had schools, it had churches, it had movie theaters, everything. And their workers lived there. And they paid their people better than anywhere in the world. Paid them super good money. But you had to live in the town. Here's the catch. They're paying them good because all this stuff is owned by the town. So I'm going to pay you good. You're going to come live in my town. But then the grocery store is going to be owned by the
Take
town.
all their money back.
The house that you're renting is owned by the business. Everything is owned, so it cycles right back into the town. Everything stays together. And really, it's not bad because everybody benefits. People are making more money. They can live fancier. Plus, the business is like, well, I'm getting it all back. It cycles back and it all works out. Here's the problem is they didn't pay them in money. They paid them in scrip. Now, what scrip is, it's like paper money. It's the same thing as money, but you can't use it anywhere except in the town. So you got paid all this money. The only place you could spend it was in that town. So you can live like a king in Pullman, Illinois. Everything's great. Get anything you want. But what happens when you decide, I need to leave and go visit a family, or well, I quit my job and I want to move somewhere else. I got all this paper that's not good anywhere else. It's called scrip. It's an alternate currency. That happened quite a bit.
Is that illegal now or no?
It's not illegal. It is illegal not to accept U.S. currency. You have to take that as well. But it's not illegal to have a scrip on top of it, to do scrip too. There are a lot of towns that have done scrip or local currencies and stuff that if you use this, you get a cheaper price places and encourages you to buy locally. I think at Briscoe, Texas, you can go down with your money. You can take $50 and you can buy every dollar with it $1.25. So you can buy this Frisco scrip. So you give them cash and they give you this money, and it's more. So you can purchase more stuff, but you have to purchase it right there in that town. You can't use it anywhere else.